Welcome to the deep dive. We sort through the sources, pull out the key insights, basically give you what you need to know.
No fluff.
Exactly. Today we're digging into Glucose Revolution by Jesse and Chelsea.
Mm-hmm.
We have the book itself, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really aimed at, everyone, the general public. We've also looked at how it's put together, what makes it stand out.
Right.
So our mission today is to unpack why these glucose spikes she talks about are a big deal, short-term and long-term, and crucially, what the book suggests we can actually do.
And it's all presented as being science-backed,
Right.
which is important. Plus, there's a little twist near the end that's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely want to get to that. So first impressions, what did you think about how she approached this for a general audience? It's not always easy with science topics.
No, it's not. But I think what's really striking is how accessible it feels right from the start.
Mhm.
It's definitely not some dense medical textbook.
Right.
It's clearly set up to translate, potentially complex science into stuff regular people can understand and, more importantly, use. The structure really helps with that.
I thought so too. That structure, part one, what is glucose? What are these spikes? Part two, okay, why are they bad for you?
Mm-hmm.
And then part three, the practical bit, how do we flatten those curves? It's a really logical flow. It feels like she's guiding you through it step by step.
Yeah, she's taking these scientific findings that often stay in, like, academic journals or maybe clinics,
Right.
and just putting them out there in plain English. And she uses her own stories, too, doesn't she? Like the Nutella crepe incident or how she got into monitoring her glucose after an accident.
No, yeah, the personal angle definitely makes it more relatable. It's not just abstract concepts. It's tied to a real person's experience.
And the visuals. Those glucose graphs she's famous for on Instagram. They're in the book.
Simplified, but yeah.
Simplified, exactly. But they really make you see what a spike looks like. You see that line shoot up after certain foods, and it just clicks, even if you've never worn a CGM yourself.
It's like getting a visual readout of what's happening inside. And this whole glucose goddess movement, the app that came later, it suggests people are really hungry for this info, right?
Absolutely. It shows she tapped into something, real public interest in understanding metabolic health better.
Okay, so a core idea in the book is that glucose isn't just something people with diabetes need to worry about. It affects everyone.
That's fundamental to her message. She uses this great analogy comparing glucose to a key lever in an airplane cockpit.
Ah, okay.
Meaning, is this one factor that has a surprisingly big impact on, well, pretty much all our bodily systems. She argues managing glucose is important for all of us, and even mentions stats suggesting lots of people might have dysregulated levels and not even realize it.
So it shifts the focus from disease management to like general wellness optimization for everybody.
Exactly. It reframes the whole conversation.
And the specific problem she highlights are these glucose spikes. How does she define those again?
A spike is defined as your glucose level jumping up by more than 30 milligrams per deciliter after you eat something.
30. Okay.
And the book argues it's these rapid ups and downs, the variability, that causes a lot of the trouble, maybe even more than just a consistently slightly high level for some issues.
Got it. So where does all this glucose come from in the first place? She goes back to basics, which I found helpful.
Right. She starts with plants and photosynthesis.
Yep.
Sunlight energy getting turned into glucose, the basic fuel.
The foundation.
Yeah. And plants store that glucose. One major way is starch. She describes it as these long, dense chains of glucose molecules packed together.
Like in potatoes, rice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beets, potatoes, rice, oatmeal, beans, lentils, all classic starchy foods. They're just full of stored glucose.
And our bodies have the tools to unlock that.
Yep. She mentions the enzyme alpha amylase. It acts like molecular scissors, snipping those starch chains apart to release the glucose. That even starts in your saliva when you chew.
Interesting. Then there's fructose.
Right, the sugar found mainly in fruits, apples, cherries, things like that. She explains the sweetness is kind of the plant's way of getting animals to eat the fruit and spread its seeds. Evolutionary trick.
Makes sense. And table sugar, sucrose.
That's half glucose, half fructose bonded together. Plants use it too, but yeah, it's become super common in our diets.
So the takeaway is that most parts of plants we eat, except the fiber,
Right, fiber's different.
they eventually break down into glucose and fructose inside us.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Which leads her to talk about the carbohydrate family.
Yeah.
Starch, fiber, fructose, sucrose, all related, with glucose as the sort of parent molecule.
It's interesting how carbs gets used, though. Scientifically, it includes fiber, right?
Yes, technically. But in nutrition talk, like in the book, when we say limit carbs, we usually mean the starches and sugars that do break down into glucose and cause those spikes. Fiber doesn't really do that.
Good distinction. And she touches on why we like sweet things so much. Dopamine.
Yeah, that evolutionary reward signal. Sweetness meant energy, which was vital when food was scarce.
But the problem now is...
The sheer amount and concentration. We're overloaded compared to our ancestors. We've gone from finding occasional berries to having, giant sodas and candy bars available 24/7.
Which sets the stage for why these spikes can be, well, harmful. The book explains 3 main things happen during a spike.
Yeah, 3 key processes. First, your mitochondria, the power plants in your cells, try to burn that incoming glucose for energy, but they can get overwhelmed by the flood.
Okay.
Second, it's something called glycation. You can think of it like internal browning or caramelization, but not in a good way. Glucose sticks to proteins and fats, damages them, and accelerates aging.
Oof, that sounds bad.
It's a key mechanism for long-term damage. And third, the excess glucose needs to be stored. Insulin comes in, directing it first to the liver and muscles as glycogen.
But there's a limit to that storage.
Exactly. Once those are full, the extra glucose often gets converted into fat for longer-term storage.
Okay, so let's break down the actual harms. The book separates them into short-term effects, stuff we might notice day to day, and the longer-term consequences.
Right. In the short term, one big one is constant hunger. The spike leads to a crash, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that crash messes with your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So you feel hungry again quickly, even if your body doesn't technically need more fuel.
Ah, the roller coaster. And that leads to cravings too, I bet.
Totally. That dopamine hit from sugar is temporary, so when you crash, your brain screams for another hit. It's a cycle.
What about energy levels? You'd think sugar gives energy, but...
But the spikes and dips actually make your mitochondria less efficient over time, so you end up feeling more fatigued, ironically. That afternoon slump. Classic glucose crash symptom.
Sleep too.
Yeah, big connection. Waking up in the middle of the night can often be due to your blood sugar dropping too low. And higher glucose levels are also linked to things like insomnia and sleep apnea.
Wow. Okay, what else for short term? Skin problems.
Acne, eczema, general redness. She links these to the inflammation that glucose spikes can cause throughout the body.
Inflammation seems key.
It really is. And then there's brain fog, difficulty concentrating after, say, a big pasta lunch. That's your brain reacting to the glucose surge and subsequent dip.
Mood swings. Irritability.
Definitely. Yeah. Those blood sugar swings can really affect brain chemistry and neurotransmitters. Even things like heartburn or acid reflux can be aggravated. And there's emerging evidence linking gut health, which diet impacts, to mood as well.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is. Now, the long-term stuff, that's where it gets potentially more serious.
For sure. That glycation process we mentioned. Over years, it adds up. It contributes directly to visible signs of aging, like wrinkles, but also internal aging, like cataracts.
And chronic inflammation again.
Yes. Fueled by repeated spikes, it's a major driver of many chronic diseases. Heart disease, some cancers, neurodegenerative diseases.
So heart health is impacted.
Definitely. Glycation damages blood vessels directly. And high glucose and insulin levels can contribute to unhealthy cholesterol profiles, like higher LDL. Even bone health can suffer over the long run.
You mentioned neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's.
Yeah, the book discusses the link. Sometimes Alzheimer's is even called type 3 diabetes because the connection between insulin resistance in the brain and the disease seems pretty strong. People with type 2 diabetes have a much higher risk, for example.
That's concerning. And for women specifically.
She links insulin resistance, often driven by glucose spikes, to PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. It's a major factor there.
And of course, the most direct links, type 2 diabetes and weight gain.
Absolutely. Constant spikes push your insulin system hard, leading eventually to insulin resistance and potentially type 2 diabetes. And because insulin is a fast storage hormone, those spikes make it easier to gain weight and harder to lose it.
Okay, so given all that, the book offers solutions, these 10 simple food hacks. Let's walk through them. Hack number 1.
Eat foods in the right order. This one's pretty foundational. Veggies first, then your protein and fats. And save the starches and sugars, the carbs, for last.
Why does the order matter?
The fiber in the vegetables, eaten first, creates a kind of viscous mesh in your intestines.
Okay.
And that physically slows down how quickly the glucose from the carbs you eat later gets absorbed into your bloodstream. Flattens the spike.
Interesting. Hack 2 builds on that, right? Add a green starter?
Exactly. It's emphasizing making it a separate course almost. Eat a plate of non-starchy veggies, could be a salad, some cooked greens, whatever, before you even start your main meal.
How much veg?
She suggests aiming for about a 1-to-1 ratio with the carbs in the meal, if possible. Raw carrots and hummus, some spinach, artichoke hearts, lots of options.
Got it. Hack 3 tackles breakfast. Go savory.
Yeah, this is a big one because typical Western breakfast, cereal, toast, pastries, sugary yogurts, juice, are often massive spike triggers right at the start of the day.
Sets you up for that roller coaster.
Precisely. So she recommends focusing on protein, fiber, and fat. Think eggs, avocado, plain Greek yogurt with nuts, maybe some non-starchy veggies.
Even fruit smoothies can be tricky, she says.
Yeah, because blending breaks down the fiber, making the sugar hit faster. She's not anti-fruit, but cautions against large amounts of high-sugar fruit, especially when fiber is pulverized.
Okay. What if you really want a sweet breakfast sometimes? That's hack 4.
Right, the sweet breakfast cheat sheet. The principle is, if you're going to have something sweet, eat protein, fat, and fiber first.
Apply the order rule within the meal.
Exactly. So maybe have some nuts or yogurt before your oatmeal, or add lots of nut butter and chia seeds to the oatmeal rather than just having it plain or with syrup.
Makes sense. Hack 5 is about snacks. Snack savory.
Pretty straightforward. Sweet snacks, candy, cookies, even some fruit bars give you that quick spike and crash, leaving you hungry again soon. They don't provide lasting energy.
So reach for nuts, seeds, veggies, and dip, cheese, olives.
Leftovers. She's a big fan of using leftovers as snacks. Things that have protein, fat, and fiber.
Okay, hack 6 seems counterintuitive. Pick dessert over a sweet snack.
Yeah, this one surprises people. But the idea is, after you've eaten a full meal with fiber, protein, fat, your digestive system's already working. Things are moving slower. Adding dessert then causes less of a relative spike than eating that same sweet thing on an empty stomach as a snack.
Because the other food buffers it.
Kinda, yeah. It's about the context and the post-meal state.
Interesting. Number 7. Reach for vinegar before you eat.
This one has some cool science behind it. Acetic acid, the active component in vinegar, seems to help your muscles take up glucose more efficiently and maybe slows stomach emptying.
So it reduces the spike.
Studies show it can reduce the glucose spike from a carb-rich meal by somewhere between 8 and maybe 30%.
How do you do it? Just shot glass of vinegar?
No, definitely not. She recommends about a tablespoon diluted in a glass of water, sipped before the meal, and maybe use a straw to protect your tooth enamel.
Good tip. Okay, hack 8. After you eat, move.
Simple but powerful. When your muscles contract, like when you walk, do dishes, squats, whatever, they can pull glucose directly from your bloodstream for energy without needing insulin.
So it bypasses the usual insulin process a bit.
Yeah, and helps clear that post-meal glucose faster, flattening the curve. Even just 10 minutes of walking after eating helps.
Different from exercising fasted, she notes.
Right. Exercising on an empty stomach can sometimes temporarily raise glucose as your liver releases stored fuel. Post-meal exercise specifically targets the glucose from the food you just ate.
Hack 9 circles back. If you have to snack, go savory. Just reinforcing the point.
Reinforcing it, yeah. She really emphasizes how sweet snacks mess with energy and mood. And she shares a personal story here about feelings of depersonalization that she linked to her own glucose swings, which is quite powerful. Highlights the brain connection.
Definitely. And finally, hack 10. Put some clothes on your carbs. Catchy name.
It is. It just means don't eat carbohydrates naked, basically. Always pair them with fiber, protein, or fat.
So instead of just an apple, have an apple with peanut butter.
Exactly. Or instead of plain rice, have rice with chicken and broccoli. The clothes, the fat, protein, fiber slow down the digestion and absorption of the glucose from the carbs.
She gives tips for fruits, like berries are better, pair with nuts yogurt, grains, whole grains slightly better, dark rye may be good.
Right. And she addresses the old myth that eating fat with carbs makes you fat. She argues it's more about the type of fat, overall calories, and the glucose spike itself, rather than the simple combination. Adding healthy fat can actually help flatten the curve.
So those are the 10 hacks, pretty actionable stuff. But then there's the twist you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Towards the end, she describes this experiment. She and a friend ate the exact same meal, cookies and ice cream, I think.
Okay.
And they tracked their glucose. Their responses were wildly different. One had a huge spike, the other much smaller.
Wow. Same food, different reaction?
Exactly. And this points to a really important area of research that's relatively new, really taking off since around 2015. We're learning that individual responses to the same food can vary dramatically.
So it's not just the food, it's us, our unique biology.
Precisely. Things like your gut microbiome, the bacteria living in your gut play a huge role, your current insulin sensitivity, your genetics, your overall physiology. It all influences how you handle glucose.
She mentions Tim Spector and the Zoe program.
Yeah, they're pioneers in this area, combining CGM data with gut microbiome analysis and blood fat responses to give much more personalized nutrition advice.
So does this mean the 10 hacks aren't useful?
No, not at all. The book concludes that while individual responses do vary, these 10 principles are generally beneficial for pretty much everyone looking to stabilize their blood sugar. They work on fundamental physiological mechanisms.
But it adds a layer of complexity or personalization?
It does. It suggests that while the hacks are a great starting point, understanding your own specific responses might be the next level.
Okay, so wrapping up. Key takeaways from Glucose Revolution. It seems that the big message is that these glucose spikes, even if you're not diabetic, can really impact your daily life, energy, mood, cravings, and contribute to serious long-term health issues.
Definitely. And crucially, the book provides practical, science-informed strategies, those 10 hacks that aren't about deprivation, but more about how and when you eat certain foods to manage those spikes.
The food order, the veggie starter, savory breakfast, vinegar, movement, clothing, your carbs, they all seem like manageable tweaks.
They are. And I think that emphasis on actionable steps is really empowering. It's not just theory, it's things you can try today. And that twist at the end is a good reminder that we're all a bit different, and personalized nutrition is a really exciting, evolving field.
And it's vital we include the disclaimer, just like the author does. This is general information, not medical advice. If you have health conditions, you're on medication, always talk to your doctor or healthcare provider before making big changes.
Absolutely essential.
But that final point about individual responses really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
How much could understanding your own body's unique reaction to food change things for your well-being? It's a powerful thought. Maybe trying a few hacks is step one, and maybe for some, it opens the door to exploring more personalized approaches down the line.
Yeah, it's food for thought, quite literally.
If you want to see more of those graphs or follow the author's work, her Instagram handle is @glucosegoddess. Definitely worth checking out.
Lots of visual examples there.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Glucose Revolution.